Okay, in this last unit of Outcome 5, we're thinking through photosynthesis and transpiration and how the two are linked together very closely. The main guiding question here is, how does water move through plants? Okay, so we are looking at the plant as a whole system. Okay, so how is water moving from the roots all the way up to the leaves? And this seems like an obvious thing to mention here, but you need to remember that each part of the plant is made up of a bunch of cells, and each cell has mitochondria and vacuoles and a cell wall, etc., as we learned in Outcome 4. So before we move on, I'm going to walk through some of the readings with you. I know some people struggle with reading. Others just like to have it read while you annotate, and that is totally fine. I'm going to give you a quick little cheat sheet before moving down. Okay. There are 3 letters that I want you to remember, and it's something that we often hear sometimes. O, osmosis. Okay. The first thing that happens to get the water from the soil into the root, moves water from soil into root, okay, is osmosis. Okay, if there's a lot of water outside and not very much inside, it's going to move into the vacuole. Okay, so into the root vacuole. Okay. O, C. Okay, C is for capillary action. Moves water from roots to leaves through the vascular bundle. And you are going to learn about the vascular bundle and why that allows for capillary action to happen in the next few readings here. D. This is just an easy way to remember. It has nothing to do with OCD, but something that we could probably remember. D. Diffusion. Okay. Water is released from the leaves as water vapor. Again, the outside air would have less water vapor than the inside of the leaf, so the water vapor diffuses out. Remember, osmosis is the diffusion of water, so similar idea here. Okay, so that is a kind of an easy way to remember this. All 3 of these together would basically make up transpiration. Okay. Let's see. All right. Please let me move this here. All right, we have a bunch of new and returning vocabulary words. As these come up in the readings, go ahead and jot some notes down on your own. You can also use the almighty Google to look them up and see why they are coming up here. These first 3 are relatively new: stoma, stomata, plural, guard cells, okay, and then vascular bundle. Capillary action has come up a few times. Osmosis just came up again. Vacuole, transpiration, and photosynthesis. Okay. So let's go through this first one. From the soil into the roots. This is addressing the O for the osmosis part. Okay. Have you ever dipped the corner of a dry paper towel into a puddle of water? All it takes is for a small corner to touch the water, and the water will quickly soak into the dry paper towel. With enough time, the entire puddle could be soaked up into the paper towel. This ability of water to move through porous spaces, or spaces with holes in it, is called capillary action, a feature of plant stems that enables water to be moved from the roots all the way up to the leaves in a process known as transpiration. Okay, hopefully you're, maybe we can highlight things like this, right? Transpiration, capillary action, they're already in bold, but you might want to highlight the definition, right? It enables water to be moved from the roots all the way up to the leaves. Okay, osmosis, or the passive diffusion of water, make sure you're looking out for these definitions, plays a role in this process as well, as explained below. The journey of a water molecule moving through a plant begins in the roots. Okay. Now this is a cross-section of a root. If you slice it in half and kind of look through it like a straw, this is what you see. Okay, you can see that there are multiple cell layers. Okay, and outside here, this would be the water in the soil. Okay, so when rain falls on plants, the water molecules move down through the soil particles and may come into contact with roots. So if we were to, let's change this to like a blue highlighter. Here's the water. Oh my, I don't know why I did all that. But here's the water outside. Okay, it might come in contact with the roots. All right, just like the rest of a plant, roots are made up of many layers of cells, okay, as we see here, all of which have nuclei, a large vacuole, mitochondria, and ribosomes, but no chloroplasts. Why is that? If a plant has not been watered in a while, the root cell vacuole will be small, or empty, and fairly thirsty. Okay, that's one way to think about it. And by thirsty, we mean ready to soak up lots of water. Roots work a lot like a paper towel. When dry, they are incredibly effective at taking up water. Interestingly, because water moves through osmosis, passive transport, it can also move out of roots as well if the soil outside is drier than the inside of the cells. Okay, it's all about where there's more water. Okay, the water is going to move towards the drier side. Plants, especially those in drier climates, think about like a desert plant, have evolved some unique ways to ensure that water loss is kept very low. Once the outside layer of cells soaks up water, the cells next to those cells can do the same because they're physically connected. Like they're physically touching each other. One cell layer at a time, the water moves from outside of the cell toward the drier cells, eventually arriving at the vascular bundle. Okay, so if you let's take another look at this. If the water's out here, right, this is a root cell, or root hair, and there's a vacuole, right, this white spot is a vacuole, and that can fill up with water, okay, because it is drier than the outside of the root in the soil. Okay, now this one's connected to this next one over, and now this one is going to soak up that water because it's drier. And guess what? The next cell over is now drier than this one, so the water is going to continue moving through these different layers of cells until it gets to the middle. Okay, this is called a xylem vessel. This is shaped like a narrow tube, which becomes very important for capillary action. Okay, so that's how osmosis, right, water's ability to use passive transport to move passively towards the dry areas, that's how it gets into the plant. Okay, so that's the first O there. O's for osmosis. All right, questions to consider. Excuse me. How are root cells similar to paper towels? Well, they both soak up water if they are dry. Right? A paper towel can also be wet, but it's not going to soak up as much water, right? Simple answer. How does water move from the soil into plant roots? If it makes sense to you, hopefully it does. Osmosis. Passive movement of water. And you could even say water moves into the root cell vacuole from the soil. Okay, what is the role of the vacuole in water uptake from the soil? The vacuole, as we know from outcome 4, stores water. So when it fills up, it's the vacuole. This vacuole stores water and fills with turgor pressure. Remember, a well-watered plant is going to have a lot of turgor pressure inside, and that's why plants are able to stand up the way that they do. All right, why might you not find chloroplasts in most root cells? I'm going to keep going so we're not going to make this too long of a video, but if you want to think about it for a second, go ahead and pause the video. Root cells do not see the sun, which means they cannot perform, hopefully you guessed it already, photosynthesis. Oh, why photosynthesis? Okay. Therefore, they do not need chloroplasts. Okay. All right. Hopefully that's just kind of a side thought question, but point there is that roots and plants and stems are all made for the job that they need to do. If they don't need to have chloroplasts down there, they might get rid of them at some point. All right. If I were a desert plant and could change my roots in some way to minimize water loss, what would you do? Again, think about it for a little bit. You could have your roots dig deeper, so maybe longer roots, or you could, and this is something that actually happens too, get rid of your thin roots because they have a lot of surface area and dry out quickly. And in fact, that is one thing that desert plants do. A lot of them have very coarse roots that just kind of anchor the plant in the soil, and they wait till a rain to make those thin ones that can take up a lot of water. Super cool adaptation. All right, on the cover page, write or draw in some of the details about how water enters the roots in the appropriate location. So go back to this diagram, and you can add some of those details. Okay, I won't tell you what to write, but I'll leave that up to you. Okay, and you might be able to remind yourself what capillary action is, osmosis, vacuole, okay, transpiration, and so on and so forth.